Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, January 18th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game is in 226 days, the game against Michigan in 317 days, and it just hit me right this very second that 22 years ago today, Jim Tressel stood in the middle of the basketball court at the Schottenstein Center and told you what was going to happen in 310 days. So got to pay, I guess, a little homage to the countdown that I guess sort of vaguely inspired the countdowns at the start of this show every single day. So there you go, 22 years ago today. Boy, we're all getting old. Speaking of people who are getting old, Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com joins me. Tony, you and I got to spend some quality time together Wednesday around lunchtime to meet Ohio State's new athletic director, Ross Bjork. And I think there was a lot of stuff that we sort of knew about him coming in. One thing I did not know about him until he started talking about it is Ross Bjork has some pretty significant family ties to the state of Ohio.
Yeah, and the best part of the state of Ohio, Northwest Ohio. His mother is from Williamsburg, Williamstown. There's a bunch of them, Tom. You'll figure it out one day. But yeah, up in the northwest area of the state. And so I thought it was interesting talking about how that's where his mom's side is from. His dad's side is from like Denver. And so during holidays, you'd have to decide where are you going to go, Ohio or Denver? Because he was in Dodge City, Kansas. That's where his family ended up. And so I talked about, getting on I-70. And that sounds like the longest, most boring drive all the way to Dayton, and then you shoot up north on 75. But talking about, just making that drive and then hitting the gravel road that takes you to the family farm takes me back to very similar things. So obviously, great stock that he's from. Afterwards, I did introduce myself to his mother and said, hey, I'm a Henry County person here. And so, we said our hellos, but yeah, his mom's side of the family all decked out in Ohio State gear, and that's not new clothes. I'm guessing that came from their closets that have been in there. And he did say, if you follow my mom on Facebook, she posts more about Ohio State than she ever did about Texas A&M.
I can't wait for his mom's hot takes on all the things he's doing wrong. If she's an Ohio State fan, she will have some thoughts, I'm sure, at some point on some things. So we'll see if he leans on his mom's expertise at any point. In terms of leading the Ohio State athletic department. But one of the things that he's going to be in charge of, and one of the things that he's sort of known for reputationally, is fundraising and development. And he talked a little bit about the difference between fundraising and development, which as someone who is in development at a nonprofit, I'm kind of nodding along as he's saying all of these things. But, it is, I think, probably one of, the main thing. Obviously, he said the most important thing is, a good experience for all the student athletes. But also it feels like fundraising and development is going to be, that feels like that's a good chunk of the reason that Ross Bjork was standing at the podium on Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah, as I'm going through my head earlier in the day, like what questions do I want to ask? And I've got all these questions. And one of the ones I wanted to ask is, if your job is a pie, what are the three biggest pieces of that pie? Like what part of your job, would constitute the three biggest pieces of your entire job, and somewhere in those top three is going to be that fundraising. And I've said it on, I think, Twitter or on the Buckeye Huddle message board. If you can fundraise and you can just not screw something up, then you can be an athletic director. Now, if you can you do that at Ohio State? That's another animal entirely. But it was interesting listening to him talk about how you become a good fundraiser, and basically it's communication, a well laid out plan. And then if you do that well enough, you won't even have to ask for money. People will just be like, how can I help you? And that sounds incredibly easy, Tom. I don't know if you're aware of how easy that is, but to just be organized, to communicate, and, have good ideas, or have good ideas brought to you that you can put forward to these people that want to give you the money.
Yeah, he said that was the difference between fundraising and development. Was development means you get to the point where they're asking you, how can I help you? You're developing that relationship, developing that interest. Yeah, that was one of those points during which I was kind of nodding along, like, I've seen and heard this elsewhere in my life, and it is one of the truisms of fundraising / development that is That is one of those things. He was also asked about some of the other elements of his story, elements of his past. He is currently, he will not, he will not officially be the AD at Ohio State until July 1st. So he is currently still the AD at Texas A&M, where he just hired Mike Elko, which I think is viewed as a pretty good, pretty solid hire and a kind of smart, reputable coach who's probably going to do good things there. But earlier in his career, he was the one who helped extend Jimbo Fisher's contract that then they had to buy out at the end of last season. So, he was asked a little bit about that whole process and his time at Texas A&M and his role in the whole Jimbo Fisher, I don't want to say fiasco, but situation. So what did he have to say about all of that?
Well, he did mention that in 2021, there came an opening somewhere else around the nation that kind of caused an extension. And it was at LSU that he was maybe referring to, where there's some talk about Fisher maybe going to LSU at one point. So this is part of the thing that you have to do. You have to extend coaches. You have to show them that they're wanted when one job opens. I mean, look at the incredible domino effect that is happening from Nick Saban retiring. It is going to impact 40 programs before this is all finally stopped. All the dishes finally stop spinning. But it's been the way he has answered that, addressed those things. The Fisher thing, talking about how you're not necessarily forced into this, but there are external factors, and there are also external factors driving you to this in terms of people, in terms of situations, circumstances. It's not just him going, you know what I'd like to do? I think I'd like to just give Jimbo Fisher an extension. I know he's not even asking for one. I know there's no reason to give him one, but there's just, you've got to kind of play the cards that you're being dealt at any given day. And the current state of college football head coaching is way beyond, I think, anybody had in their mind 20 years ago. And now that you're in this business, he got into it. He's been an AD for like 30 years or whatever. And now this is swimming with sharks areas that he's in now. And sometimes you just have to get your arm bitten off.
And that's not really a unique thing for him by any means. I mean, if you look at the Nick Saban retirement and the cascade effect from that in terms of how many different people got extensions or got pay bumps. And then, of course, you have some of the people who jumped. Kalen DeBoer jumps to Alabama, and that allows Jed Fish to jump to Washington, and that allows the San Jose State coach to jump to Arizona. And it's just kind of a little bit of a cascade effect there. So, yeah, this is, I think, a little bit of the realities of the market. And that market may be changing to a certain degree because there are other economic forces at work other than just Jimmy Sexton clients and Trace Armstrong clients and all of that sort of being able to play the game. Now, some of the realities of the finances of college football and college sports in general are starting to change with the Charlie Baker proposal and, schools potentially bringing NIL in-house and all that kind of stuff. You can sort of ask someone, so what do you think about the future of college sports? And then it's just like, all right, well, I'm going to go just set a recorder down and walk away, and I'll come back in 3 hours, and I'm sure you will have basically written me an entire book. So what are Ross Bjork's views on the future of college sport?
Yeah, in a tiny soundbite, basically, I thought it was interesting. He talked about the alignment that you need to have in the university, from the president down to the AD, down to the coaches. And I think the alignment at Ohio State is that change is coming. You have to be part of the change. You have to figure out how to compensate the players, the student athletes, and that's going to change other aspects of fundraising. So that's why you go get a very good fundraiser to help deal with all of this. But the interesting thing for me when he talked about how he sees a tipping point coming in the next 3 to 5 years in terms of whether it's breaking away, whether it's, who knows? And obviously, I think we're going to see some compensation before then, but in terms of the breaking away of the haves versus the have-nots, or the have very muches versus the have not nearly as muches. But then I asked him, are you looking forward to that tipping point? And he said, I just am looking forward to clarity and no longer being in the gray of any of this. having a legally defensible plan, I think, is also key because they're waiting on, the NCAA to do their thing. They're waiting on Congress to do their thing. He is looking forward to, yes, there's going to be some upheaval. It's going to be crazy, but it has been crazy for about 4 years now with everything going on. And that includes a year in there with COVID where everything else is going crazy and has still continued to impact the bottom line for a lot of people. He is just ready for things to settle down. And it reminds me of the thing that Ryan Day has always said, let's just stop changing stuff. Because every time you change something, there is a butterfly effect and there is something else that happens from that. So let's just get through this right now. But I do think I think Ted Carter and and Ross Bjork as well. I think it was Ross Bjork that said there are some things that you can do right now without splitting off, and that's fix December. And I think December, we've talked about it so many times, Tom. December is an impossible time for coaches in bowl games with the portal, with the signing day. They need to fix that. And he said, we should be able to do that right now without having to break away from anybody in the lower tiers or the higher tiers or whatever. They should be able to just sit down, talk this out, and get it fixed.
Yeah, there are sort of shorter term fixable problems and medium term fixable problems. And then who knows about the long term at this point. But, you talked about the haves and the have nots, and financially, Ohio State is one of the haves. And on the field, Ohio State is one of the haves. He was asked how he perceived Ohio State, before he even applied for the open athletic director position. And he said, quote, championship brand, period. And I think that's something that, we'll see how much Ohio State fans agree with and disagree with what he does over the coming years. But I think that's one thing that Ohio State fans will definitely align with very closely there, with alignment being such a key thing. The expectations are pretty clear there. Championships. And he's had a lot of very, very positive things to say about Ryan Day and thinks he's a championship coach. But I think that is sort of sending a message on day one. Championship brand, period. That means you're expecting some championships.
Yeah, and then after his press conference, he broke away a little bit and talked to us in a little scrum and was asked basically what are the standards and what are the standards? And he said championships. And that's what it's always been. And he spoke earlier about removing barriers for those championships and finding ways to help the coaches achieve their goals and things like that. And, there are some programs at Ohio State that are meeting that standard. He mentioned the women's hockey team for one, looking forward to getting to know them better as they, attempt to win a national title. But the championship aspect of it, the desire for that, it's not something that Gene Smith hasn't also wanted. So, there's only, why didn't the previous guy want to win championships? There's not that aspect of it. But I do think it's good for the fans to hear that. It's good for the players to hear that. It's great for the coaches to hear that.
Yeah, that's you set the expectation on day one, and then you kind of go from there. Yes, I'm sure it has occurred to Gene Smith that, hey, we should try to win championships, and they have won a lot of championships over the years in various sports, including football, with Gene Smith at the helm of the Ohio State football program. Just wanted to end this on this. I think my single favorite moment, Tony, was when Ross Bjork is at the podium and he's coached in, he has been an AD at multiple SEC schools. So he, as they say in New York, he knows from crazy football fans. But he said, how many message board situations are there around here? 3 or 4? Tony, that felt like you've coached you've been an AD in the SEC. That's cute. Welcome to Ohio State. Wait till you see how many media outlets there are.
Yeah, my favorite part when he said 3 or 4, and the media in the first 2 sections of the stands in the seats there started laughing, like, oh, friend, so much more than you realize. You see the people that are sitting in front of you right now. This is going to be every time you speak and more, because that's just the way it is at Ohio State. And I always go back to a few years back. There was a scandal at Michigan State, and they had to have a press conference, an emergency press conference. And there's a really, really serious thing. And there's a picture of the scrum before things in the hall before things started. And there's like 3 people there. And that's just one of the things that makes Ohio State different is the attention and the coverage. And welcome. Learn to speak Columbus, buddy.
The tradition, the people, the excellence, and that's just the reporters. Yeah, so very interesting first day with Ross Bjork. Going to be interesting to see how this all develops. I was very intrigued by the fact that he has Ohio State ties that I don't know that anyone was necessarily aware of beforehand, but as someone who did the drive from very far away to the holidays in Ohio, I can kind of relate, coming from a different direction, but I can kind of relate as doing that as a kid and ending up in Columbus, before all is said and done. So we'll see. We'll see if Ross Bjork enjoys as long a stay in Columbus as or Central Ohio as I have. We'll see. That will all start on July 1st. He's actually going to start around March, April. I think he said it's sort of this spring, and then he will sort of as a little bit of a transitional thing with Gene Smith, and then his first official day and in charge, July 1st. What an eventful year that'll be. That is the same, I believe, first day as UCLA, USC, Oregon, Washington in the Big Ten. What an eventful day that's going to be. What an eventful year it's going to be at Ohio State in the Big Ten, around college sports in general, and of course at BuckeyeHuddle.com, where there's lots of stuff going on. We didn't even talk about the 2 Alabama players that went in the transfer portal in the last 24 hours. Caleb Downs, Caden Proctor. Ohio State may be making a pursuit for one or both of them. Other transfer portal possible targets, other recruiting targets. There's plenty of recruiting news potentially on the way. It's going to be a heck of a month at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Why don't you join us there? Tony and Kevin and I covering the team, Mark covering recruiting, Justin, Mickey, Devin, Ross covering X's and O's, making you a smarter football fan, and of course, a very active and lively community on the Huddle Board presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse. We would love to see you there. We'd also love to see you at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle, where we have plenty of live shows, plenty of live streams, plenty of recorded shows, plenty of a little bit of everything for everyone. It is your one-stop shop for pretty much everything you need to know about Ohio State football. youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.